What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and it's not a victory Monday for the New York Giants. They lost yesterday, but in many ways, it feels like it is. The New York Giants losing yesterday. Meanwhile, the Las Vegas Raiders and their victory Monday makes it a big victory Monday for the New York Giants. They move back up to the number one overall pick in next year's draft. They currently hold the number one pick, and they are in the driver's seat to pick number one. Raiders winning that game. Now they have 3 wins. Giants only have 2. And if you've been watching this Giants team, they're probably not winning another game to close out the year. They play the Colts next weekend and then the Eagles the following weekend. So the likelihood of the Giants winning 2-15, they would be the only 2-win team in the league. Therefore, they would have the number one overall pick in the NFL draft. And then it becomes a debate. Who do they take? Do they trade down? Do they stick and pick? Do they take Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders? Who is making the pick is also a whole nother part of the conversation. But Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? How are you feeling? The New York Giants, it's not guaranteed just yet. The Giants can absolutely find a way to mess this up and win in the next 2 weeks and not get the number one overall pick, but it seems very likely. Right now, they're projected to pick number one. A very good chance that they do, and then it's just about who's making that pick and who's the pick going to be. How are you feeling following yesterday's games with the Giants moving up the draft order?
How am I feeling? That was our Super Bowl yesterday, man. Raiders, Jaguars. Who would have thought? And Raiders winning is huge for the Giants. I mean, listen, this is the exact scenario that happened last year, but reverse. We actually ended up getting the number one overall pick. Like you said, things could get messed up, but there were people out there that thought the Giants were going to beat the Falcons. We lost, was it 34-7? Wasn't even competitive. Wasn't even close. We had 2 pick sixes. The Giants are not beating the Colts. Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor had 200 yards and 3 touchdowns yesterday. More than 200 yards. Anthony Richardson had a couple rushing touchdowns. All the Colts have to do is score 14 points, and they will win. That is it. They're going to beat the Giants. The Giants are going to lose by at least 15 points. This is the worst Giants team I've seen in a long, long time. They are not even competitive against bad football teams. The Falcons barely hung on to beat the freaking Raiders, who are probably the second worst team in the league right now. Maybe the Jaguars are there. I don't know. Even the Panthers have turned things around and look pretty damn competitive. I mean, they beat the freaking Cardinals, and they knocked them out of the postseason race. So, the Giants, while every other team seems to be trending in a little bit better of a direction, at least winning a couple of games that are screwing their draft capital, the Giants are embracing the tank in a way that I think they are just that bad. I don't think the Giants are tanking on purpose. I don't think they're trying to lose on purpose. Yes, they've placed a ton of guys on IR. Well, Burns, Neighbors still fighting through injury. Why aren't they on IR if they're losing and putting guys on IR on purpose, which is not allowed in the NFL? You can't just put guys on IR without a reason. So I do think that right now, are the Giants trying to lose that on purpose? I don't think that's good for their culture. I don't think it's good for their players. And I certainly don't think it's good for Brian Dable or Joe Schoen, who were about to be the first team since 18 games became a thing to lose all 9 home games. So this is becoming an embarrassment from John Mara's perspective. And I don't know if you saw the picture, Anthony, of John Mara's face during that loss to the Falcons. Did not look good. He was blank stare by himself. Every week I see a picture of him by himself sitting alone with the most depressed, defeated stare I've ever seen. And to be quite frank with you, I think John Mara's watching this because it's an audition. You know what I mean? I think he's watching this to see how is Dable, how are the players, how are Shane managing this situation at hand. I don't really think they are managing it, to be quite honest. I think they're losing miserably. So are they tanking on purpose? I don't think so. I don't think that anyone tanks on purpose unless you're the Eagles and what they did with Nate Sudfeld a couple years ago. That was an obvious tank job. They just took their starting quarterback out in the middle of the game to lose. The Giants are not trying to lose. They're putting their best players out there. They're trying to make something happen. Their players are just losing. They're just not good. So this is where we are, and now we look to the future and say, okay, let's find a positive. And let's talk about the positive, Anthony. Let's talk about the quarterbacks at hand. The Giants, if you end up with number one, well, the Raiders winning sends them all the way back to, 6th overall in the draft? They got screwed. I'm seeing Raiders fans going crazy right now on social media, just like we did last year. Why are you winning when we need to get Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams or Drake May? What are you doing? This is what the Raiders fans are posting, the exact same thing right now, and it's actually quite funny to see how we've already gone through this experience, and maybe we're on the opposite side of it. Now, this is not the best draft class in the world for quarterbacks, but you just never know. Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, one of those 2 guys you hope to God is going to pan out. And if you're the Giants, you got to freaking pick the one that does. You got to make the decision that does. And it boils down to this, Anthony. Do you take the risk on the guy with the more upside? Or you take the risk on a guy who maybe has the higher floor that can do all the little details better off the bat, but maybe doesn't reach that superstar status that I think Cam Ward has. I think Cam Ward has that ability to be a great, like, just star player. He's got all the instincts. Not to say that Sanders doesn't, but just how I evaluate them, I think that Ward has the higher ceiling and Sanders has the higher floor, but still has a decent ceiling. Do you take the risk on the guy that could be a star, or do you take the safer, more conservative option that probably is a little bit better now, but maybe doesn't get you to where you want to be down the road? That's just how I see it. It could be the opposite. I'm sure you have your opinions on the matter. How are you feeling right now? The Giants get to take their quarterback, the one they want the most, and do you think they go for the most potential or the safest route?
I think that's a tricky question, which way the Giants will go, again, because we don't know who's going to be making the pick. Like, that's piece one of this puzzle. I know a lot of Giants fans are assuming that Joe Schoen is going to be back. There's a couple of noisy beat writers who claim they know for sure that Joe Schoen is going to be back, and they're going on their campaign, and they're being major proponents of bringing back Joe Schoen. I'm not so convinced that Joe Schoen will be returning in 2025. The Giants are on a 10-game losing streak. It's the worst in franchise history, in the 100th season of the franchise. I think that alone right there is enough to get the general manager fired. So for everybody who assumes that Joe Schoen is safe, I'm not making that assumption. I think there is a very legitimate chance that John Mara does decide to blow it up. He does decide to clean house and fires Joe Schoen on Black Monday following the conclusion of the 2024 NFL season. And if that's the case, then I don't know who is going to be making the pick, Alex. Therefore, I don't know if they're going to pick the quarterback that I think they're going to pick right now. Right now, if I had to guess, I think the Giants really like Shedeur Sanders. I think Brandon Brown likes him. I think Joe Schoen likes him. That's who they like. But if they bring in a new general manager, who's to say that guy isn't already head over heels for Cam Ward? Maybe he fell in love with Ward during the pre-draft process in 2024. Everyone needs to remember that he was a draft-eligible quarterback last year, even declared and momentarily entered the NFL draft before going back to school. So there could be an NFL general manager candidate, Alex, out there around the league who gets hired by the Giants and did some quarterback homework last offseason and already really likes Cam Ward. So he could end up becoming the favorite for the next general manager that steps in if the Giants do hire a new general manager. So it's really tough to tell. I don't know if they're going to go for the higher floor, the higher ceiling. I think they're going to figure out who is the better overall prospect in their respective opinion. People are going to have other opinions. There always are differing opinions at the quarterback spot in the NFL draft. But whoever the consensus number one is, that's going to end up being the guy that the Giants take because they have the number one pick. But I think that's really important. The Giants, decision makers, won't be able to hide behind any excuses for their quarterback. If they do end up with the number one overall pick, which it looks like they will, the quarterback that they take, that is the one that they believe is the best in the class. There's no, we were picking at 3, so we had to take May, but we really liked Daniels more. There's no way that any information like that can leak. There's nothing. You take the guy at number 1, and that's the guy, no excuses for that. So I think that's important, and that's really what I want to see, because for the last 6 years plus, Alex, all I've heard is excuses and bullshit for the New York Giants, especially in the front office and in those decision makers. Well, they wanted this guy, but they had to settle for this. Well, they wanted to sign this guy, but they couldn't because of this reason. No excuses now. Number 1 overall pick, you're taking the quarterback you think is the best, and if you're wrong, then you're just flat out wrong. And if you're right, then kudos to you. Hopefully the New York Giants are a better team for it. So it's going to be very interesting, Alex. But speaking of quarterback play and the way quarterbacks can turn around a franchise, think about how Jordan Love turned around the Green Bay Packers years ago. And yes, of course, this is my perfect transition that I always have into the BetUS sponsorship. Thank you, BetUS, for sponsoring this episode. Today, I'm going over to BetUS to take a look at tonight's Monday Night Football matchup between the Saints and the Packers. I really like a Green Bay over 28.5 points at minus 105. Now, I know that's a really high line to reach. However, they've done it in 4 straight weeks. It's the end of the season. They need some points. They need some more wins to try and race towards the top seeding in the NFC. They're close. Not quite there at the top seed, but they do need to pick up some clutch wins and secure their seeding. I think the Green Bay Packers are in for a big performance, a lot of points, and I like them at home for over 28.5 at minus 105. on BetUS. I'm going to go ahead, throw $10 down there, see if I win some cash. Let me know if you're tailing me, and also make sure to go check out BetUS and use code YouTube150 for a 150% deposit match up to $2,000 on your bet over at BetUS. Go ahead and check it out. The sportsbook with the fastest payouts in the industry. But Alex, back to it. No more Green Bay Packers quarterback, New York Giants quarterback. I want to get your take on the other aspect of it that I asked you, though. Not about, you asked me the ceiling, the floor. I don't know if I have an opinion on those two guys in a way that I can formulate who I think has the higher ceiling and floor just yet, but I do think it's important to note that the general manager picking now might be different from a general manager who would be picking then, depending on who's there. So what's your take on that, Alex? The way that the opinion of the Giants could shift. Right now, I think you're in agreement with me. It looks like Joe Shane really likes Shedeur Sanders. But the Giants hire another guy, that guy could like Cam Ward. And so we really don't know where we're at right now, but I do think there's an argument to be made. The New York Giants on a 10-game losing streak, someone else needs to be making this decision. Again, maybe not everybody agrees, but that's my opinion, especially when you look at that 2022 draft, 2 top 10 picks, neither one of them panning out the way they should. The 2023 first-round pick was a miss. The Giants were measuring quarterbacks in last year's draft class up against the talent of Drew Lock, clearly over-evaluating the talent of Drew Lock, overvaluing how good he was because he absolutely stinks. The Giants thought he was a lot better than he is. In every opportunity that they've had to make a critical decision about the quarterback position, they have failed to make the right one under Joe Shane, and that's why I think they need to move on from him. But Alex, what are your thoughts on that? The fact that the Giants' decision over the quarterback really decides on their decision over the GM.
I mean, these two things have to be tied. If you fire Brian Daboll and you keep Joe Shane, your GM's still on the hot seat. Maybe he has 1 year to prove it. If you fire Joe Shane and keep Brian Daboll, your head coach is on the hot seat, and he hasn't proven he can maximize a quarterback just yet. I mean, we saw Daniel Jones in year 1, and then every year after that, regression. Drew Lock comes here. Brian Daboll's a quarterback whiz. Well, Drew Lock, sorry to tell you, buddy, but your stock is at an all-time low after joining the Giants right now. So, if you look at the situation at hand, I'm of the proponent. Listen, there's going to be coaches, there's going to be GMs out there to hire. Like there always is, there will be people. And if you can guarantee them, 1, you're going to pay them well, and 2, you get the first overall pick in the draft, that's attractive enough to get someone pretty good. Now the question is, if you fire one of those guys, a head coach in Daboll or Joe Shane, nobody's going to want to work with Joe Shane after his track record. Why would any good coach want to come here and work with Joe Shane after seeing what he's done to completely destroy this roster? Why would any GM want to come and work with Brian Daboll and not be able to hire their own head coach? If you fire one of them, you got to fire both of them. There is no shot that one of those guys survives. They're both got to go if you're going to fire one of them. So that's personally how I feel about it. It's one or it's done. Or it's rather, it's none or it's done. So, you look at the situation at hand. I personally think that you should pair a new GM, new head coach, similar to how the Commanders just did it with Dan Quinn and Peters, and get your quarterback and give them a leash surrounded by their guy, right? Like they get their guy, they get their quarterback, and then they execute a plan to build around that quarterback. Right now, the Giants, I mean, how many years do we have to let Joe Shane and Brian Daboll continue to make mistakes until they get it right? They've made every mistake in the book, every single one, and they will probably make more because there's got to be more out there they can make. It's more losses than wins. It's more duds than success. And that ultimately is not a winning strategy in the NFL. You have to be consistent. And the Giants make catastrophic mistake after catastrophic mistake after catastrophic mistake. It's not like they signed a $10 million per year guy and it didn't work out. They traded they let 2 of their best players walk. They signed Daniel Jones to a horrible contract that aged very poorly, and they have to be held to some responsibility for that. Looking at the situation, Anthony, they have to pair a new regime with a new quarterback because that is what good teams do. There have been countless examples of this in the most recent memory. How about DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud? How about, obviously, like I just said, Dan Quinn, and even Cliff Kingsbury has done decent with, with the Commanders.
Well, I think that, similar to the argument that you're making, there's a sister argument to be made. You're talking about bringing in a new head coach with a new quarterback. How about bringing in a quarterback with a lame duck head coach who's on his last leg, like the Chicago Bears have done for 3 straight rookie quarterbacks, and they've ruined the 2 straight rookie quarterbacks. The jury's still out for Caleb Williams, but there's obviously been a stunt in his growth and development because of the fact that they entered the season with Eberflus, and they had to fire Eberflus midway through the year, which we all knew was going to happen. So, yeah, you're making a good point, but again, there's the sister argument. It's not just about marrying a head coach and a quarterback. 'Cause, I mean, you guys know my take on this. You should be able to move on from either one at any time, never marry them together. But when you've got a quarterback stepping in with a new head coach, you can build something for the long term. However, you also don't want to have a head coach on his last leg force a quarterback upon him and potentially fire him, the staff, and everybody who's been working with this quarterback and completely stunting the quarterback's growth. Another recent example that's obvious for Giants fans is Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones had a year under Pat Shurmur. Arguably the best season of his career was his rookie season. The following year, Jason Garrett stepped in and pretty much ruined him as a player at the NFL level. And then again, it happened a few years later when they brought in Brian Daboll. They got some sort of resurgence. They made another change at OC. The play caller changed. Mike Kafka then stepped in. So, it's been constant change for the New York Giants at the quarterback spot with the coaching pairing. They need to finally get a pairing that can work in lockstep together, like you just said, Alex. I do completely agree with you. But my biggest fear would be a desperate head coach in Brian Daboll taking on a rookie quarterback, trying to save his job with this rookie quarterback, cutting corners, getting desperate, not having enough time to let that quarterback grow, forcing him into the lineup, makes mistakes, and boom, now the head coach is fired, and now the quarterback's development has been rushed. Maybe he needs to go back to the bench and sit for a while before he can come back in, like a Bryce Young. There's so many ways that could go that won't be beneficial to the rookie quarterback. I think the number one thing the Giants need to do, Alex, before they decide who they're picking with that number one overall pick, make sure that this is an environment that a number one pick quarterback can actually grow and strive in. It needs to be a comfortable quarterback-friendly environment. How do you do that? Well, you got to get better offensive linemen. You got to make sure you have a stable coaching staff with a good offensive coordinator. Get a good quarterbacks coach, offensive quality control coach. Upgrade at all of those spots, and then also a wide receiver, another one would help. Maybe even a more reliable tight end. You got to do a lot of work before you even get to April to make that decision on who your quarterback is going to be. But it all really starts in the front office. Who's making that pick and who is picking the next head coach? Who's making the hirings and the firings? And then can we finally get a head coach who's in lockstep with that quarterback? It's going to be very, very important. So it's a good point that you bring up, Alex, just for the development of a rookie quarterback. It's one thing to get the rookie quarterback. It's another thing to get him and properly develop him.
It's absolutely one of the most difficult things in football to develop a young quarterback, but you can't put your young quarterback behind the eight ball, but before you even get a chance to develop him. And like you're saying right now, I mean, look, guys, putting a quarterback on the red hot seat, man, he's sitting on an iron right now. If you put that young quarterback and pair him with a quarterback with a head coach that is scoldering hot, and a GM scoldering hot, the Giants, we know the Giants, will find a way to make this an absolute devastating sequence of events. We will ruin that young quarterback. We will end up firing Joe Shane and Brian Daboll anyway, just to usher in a new offense, a new head coach, a new GM, and basically reset any sense of development this young quarterback had. They will destroy this young player because they have proven year in and year out they destroy talent more than anybody else, right? We have a good rookie class right now. Good rookie class. And Anthony, this rookie class has aside from Tyrone Tracy, I'd say, has slowly tapered off throughout the year. Newbin's on IR now. I'm pretty sure he's on IR, right? They've already put him on IR. Andrew Phillips was injured. He was doing too much. Neighbors is playing through injury. He's frustrated with his role. It was a great start. And Theo Johnson's on IR. Like, they've slowly destroyed this rookie class as the season has gone on, and we want to give them a second year to figure it out? Miss me with that. What are they going to do to a young quarterback? And who has to overcompensate for poor roster construction, bad receiver room, bad offensive line, bad coaching, poor discipline, no effort from their playmakers. A young quarterback's great, but he does not solve problems that are implemented by the coaching staff. He does not solve lack of discipline. He does not solve lack of communication. He's a piece that needs to be built around, and there needs to be structure, and the Giants have none. You can't put a young quarterback in this position, guys. They will destroy him. They've done nothing to prove that that they can maintain the growth of young talent, right? Dexter Lawrence, veteran. These guys cannot be graded on the same scale. Andrew Thomas, veteran, and he's injury prone now because the Giants are asking these guys to do too much, right? They're driving these young players into the ground, and we want to give them a chance to develop a young quarterback? No freaking way, man. You got to go and get them a competent culture guy that's going to help foster a sense of growth and development and process around a young quarterback, and that needs to be the plan. The plan from the get-go. The Giants brass right now is dead set on saving their jobs. They were going to take the quarterback to save their jobs, and then they're going to put him in a system that is already world-renowned for destroying young talent. And people want to do that. People want to go down that road. I'll see you on the other side, guys. I'm not going anywhere. Anthony, you're not going anywhere. We're Giants fans for life. But God knows that we've seen this story before. And God knows that we know what this coaching staff is capable of doing when it comes to deteriorating the confidence of young talent. You see these young guys. You saw the confidence Neighbors had coming out of LSU, right? The guy was untouchable. He looks miserable. Miserable out there. Miserable. Sanders, that confidence. Cam Ward, that confidence. How long is it going to take for the Giants to destroy that confidence? How long is it going to take for the offensive line to fall apart because we have no depth? How long is it going to take for if Neighbors gets hurt and you don't have any receivers and you can't throw the ball, how long is it going to take before our offense falls apart? And they start to overcompensate with running and doing risky things, and their confidence is shot. They get hurt. We know how this story goes. I mean, that's just how I see it. I think, Anthony, you're probably seeing it a similar light than I do.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of similar to what I was saying. Like when they drafted Daniel Jones and then they fired the head coach, brought in new OCs over and over, and they ruined the confidence of Daniel Jones. Like, listen, even though I wasn't the biggest Daniel Jones fan in 2019, I wasn't crazy about the draft pick. I bought in because he was wearing a Giants helmet, and I felt like, hey, there are some things to like about him. Hopefully they can develop him properly. They failed that part of it. So we always talk about, well, Daniel Jones failed the Giants in many ways. The Giants also failed Daniel Jones. They didn't get him the proper pieces around him. They did not develop him in a way that could turn him into a consistent performer at the top of the NFL at the quarterback position. But that's what it really comes down to for me, Alex. When you're looking at this quarterback position and the mismanagement of it by the New York Giants, and I'm not just talking about Daniel Jones, guys, because listen, that story's been written, it's over with, there's nothing to retread there. But for the last 6 years, while Daniel Jones was on this roster, the New York Giants didn't draft a single quarterback. That, to me, is malpractice. The fact that both Gettleman and Shane decided that they weren't going to address the position with a rookie in any shape, way, or form is a complete blunder. In the NFL, you have to constantly be taking darts. You have to constantly be throwing darts at the board at the quarterback position. You never know when your quarterback can go down with an injury, and you never know when you have the next Tom Brady waiting for you. And not to say that everybody's a Tom Brady, but when the Dallas Cowboys drafted Dak Prescott in the 4th round back in, 2016 or 14, were they expecting him to be their long-term franchise quarterback? No. Is he? Yes, they had Tony Romo, but they needed somebody young. They needed to throw a dart at the board, and now they have another franchise quarterback. Were the San Francisco 49ers expecting Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy to be their franchise quarterback? No, but they threw a dart at the board, and look at what they got. And let's take it a step further. It doesn't even have to be for a franchise quarterback. Was Jimmy Garoppolo expected to become a franchise quarterback for the 49ers? They traded a second-round pick for him. He was drafted in the middle rounds by the New England Patriots. It's just a good practice to take quarterbacks in the middle and late rounds because sometimes they develop into starters, sometimes they just become valuable trade pieces. I mean, the Patriots getting a second-round pick for a second-round pick in Garoppolo, that's great. That's great general managing of a franchise. The Giants just haven't even tried that, though. They haven't even taken a quarterback outside of the first round. Haven't taken one since 2019. That's insane to me. So this offseason, they're finally going to take a quarterback. But it doesn't start and end there. There's a lot more positions to address, and there's more to do at the quarterback position than just address it with the number 1 overall pick. There was more to do this past offseason. Giants fans say, well, they tried to trade up and take Drake May or Jaden Daniels, and they couldn't. What stopped them from taking a Spencer Rattler in the 5th round? Just to give them at least something back there. Give them some sort of young quarterback. Spencer Rattler wasn't going to prevent you from drafting Cam Ward with the number 1 overall pick. You still should have a rookie quarterback on this roster. You want to know why? Because of what just happened this past weekend for Atlanta. They got to at least put a youngster under center, spark something, win a game by a lopsided margin, and see if they have a future under center. The Giants do not have one right now. They don't have anything. You know what would have happened for the Giants, Alex, if they did draft a rookie? Maybe in the 5th round. Let's say, for example, the Giants took Spencer Rattler in the 5th round this year, and he went out there in the final 3 weeks of the season and played a decent stretch of football, but they still had the number 1 overall pick. His trade value is probably higher than the 5th round pick that they spent to get him in the following offseason. They could probably trade him for a 3rd round pick to a team that needs a quarterback and is maybe picking outside of the top 5 picks. Maybe, let's say, the Raiders, if they don't end up landing the quarterback that they want, maybe they would have given up a 3rd round pick for Rattler for a year just to see if they could throw a dart at the board and hit a bullseye. But the Giants don't do these things. They don't think like other NFL teams, and for that reason, they fall behind other NFL teams. And again, it all circles back around. There needs to be a new general manager. Nobody's going to convince me otherwise. This team needs to have a fundamental change. But the mismanagement of the quarterback position is the reason that I feel that way. Because Joe Schoen, not only did he give Daniel Jones an asinine contract that I talked down before it was even signed. I said they should have franchise tagged him. They need to franchise tag him. They went and signed them anyway. It's not just that decision, though. That was a bad decision. That hurt them. But it's also the fact that they decided no competition for Daniel Jones. No rookie quarterback in the 2022 draft, even in the middle rounds. Nobody in the 23 draft. Nobody in 24. They just never brought in a quarterback to compete with Daniel Jones. And that was the actual error in their way of thinking. To put all of your eggs in one basket and have no backup plan, no insurance, that's what did the New York Giants in. So now we're at this point where we have an opportunity to bring in that quarterback. We're still going to need an insurance plan behind that one. I don't trust Joe Schoen to get the right quarterback in here, and I definitely don't trust him to have a good insurance plan for that quarterback because every step of the way, he has proven he doesn't know how to do that. And I get it, he's a first-time GM. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. If you're not getting it right the first time, you're probably not getting it right at any time in the NFL level. You got to be able to perform immediately as a general manager in the NFL level. There are no rookie growing pains for me. You can miss me with that. There are GMs all over the league who step in and revitalize franchises.
Exactly.
The Giants need to find the guy who can do that. Look at the Detroit Lions. Look at the 49ers when they brought in John Lynch. They've been a powerhouse in the NFC ever since, all over the NFL. That's what the New York Giants need to find.
Yeah, I mean, look, it happens all the time. And I hate this, like, be patient, be patient. What are we being patient for them to make more big mistakes? Because, we don't have 5, 6, 7 years. It doesn't take 3 or 4 years to rebuild. It doesn't take 10 years. We've been doing this for 10 years now. And just being patient doesn't mean that it's going to work. You know what I mean? We see different ideas, different personnel, different coaches succeed all the time. You just have to hit on the right coach. Brian Daboll is, the players are done. They're done. Like, they don't have respect for them. We've heard from Jordan Ronan that the players don't like Joe Schoen. He's kind of gone behind their backs and changed things all the time, especially with Drew Lock, literally passed him over. Why would any free agent want to be convinced by Joe Schoen? If Joe Schoen goes, let's say, we know we need a new cornerback, or maybe a WR2. Maybe you wanted to go try to convince Garrett Wilson to come here, or maybe you wanted to try to get DJ Reed or T. Higgins. And you go to those free agents, and they come in for a visit, see what's up. They have a couple offers on the table. They're gauging their options, and Joe Schoen's here like, well, we can't sell him that we're a good team because that's not what we showed right last year. We can't sell him that our locker room's galvanized because it fell apart. We can't convince him that we're going to give him the best chance to succeed because we've not done that. So if you're a free agent going into that building to talk to Joe Schoen about signing a contract, and you look at him, and he's got this, we have a plan, we're going to get a quarterback, we're going to put you in a place to succeed. And he asks, well, what happened to Drew Lock? What happened to Isaiah Simmons? These guys that came back hoping to get bigger roles or get, boost their stock, maybe revitalize their careers. Why shouldn't I go to a team like the Vikings or the Bears or a team that, maybe the Bears not the best example, but, a team like the Vikings, or how about the Packers? A team that's going to prompt me up and make me better and maybe get me another contract or maybe put me in a chance to win and succeed. Why do I have to come in and immediately be this galvanizing force in a team that's just had the worst record in football? Why would any reasonably good GM, a reasonably good free agent, want to come to the Giants aside from the Giants having to overpay to get people because they're garbage? Right? That's the only way the Giants and Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are convincing any free agent to come here, because they're going to have to overpay for them. Because that is what happens when you're a dog shit team. You have to overpay for free agents because you can't sell them on the fact that you're going to come here and win. That's just the truth. Sorry to tell you guys, but that's the truth. I think most people would agree with that too. Yeah, sure, they'll sign for money, absolutely, but you're gonna have to pay well over market price because we're that bad of a team and that much of an embarrassment to the entire league. So you bring in a new GM, a new head coach with a bit of respect, a bit of a plan, and you leave the bad shit behind you. Those free agents may be able to convince themselves that they're joining a team on the rise, a team with a bit of optimism, that maybe it's not just about money. Maybe they buy into the plan. That's how I would view it as a free agent. If I had offers on the table, unless the Giants are way overpaying me, I'm not freaking going there. Because they are a dumpster fire and I'm going to lose and be freaking miserable. Probably end up demanding a trade at some point anyway, which is what I expect guys like Dexter Lawrence to do if they don't turn this shit around fast.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. I agree with you. And I think that, it's really difficult to attract people to New York, but I think that's not only for the free agents, Alex. It is also for the general manager and head coach candidates. And that's a big part of this discussion. Again, as pro firing Shane as I am, as pro clean house as I am, I do also recognize who else is out there? Who's the better option? Because if the Giants end up firing Shane and Dable, it's another regime that got turned over in a really quick time. Is a new regime really going to want to step in? Is somebody going to find this an attractive destination? Now, of course, there's always going to be the argument. It is a historic franchise. Legends were born here. It is New York. It's the big city. It's the big apple, the big market. All of those things are true, but not all of those things matter to all of the top candidates. Some of them don't care about those things. Some of them just want a stable job. And the New York Giants are anything but a stable job. So they are, to many coaches and GMs and front office execs around the league, Alex, they've been career killers. So can they really convince somebody to revitalize their career here? I don't know. It's a big question mark. Or take the next step in their career. It's going to be something that John Mara has to consider. But I will say, I think that the only way that he can theoretically attract those top candidates is to pay somebody else to do the candidate searching, similar to what the Jets are doing. They hired the 33rd team. The 33rd team is going out there, casting a very wide net for potential GM candidates, and they're conducting interviews on behalf of the New York Jets. That's what the New York Giants need to do, honestly. And that's similar to what the Washington Commanders do, and that's why they got things right. And again, they didn't get their first pick of head coach, Alex. They didn't want Dan Quinn originally. They were really vying for Ben Johnson. They even had a preliminary discussion with Bill Belichick. Eventually, they got down to Dan Quinn. They decided, okay, let's just go with the proven head coach who's been to the big game before. Dan Quinn isn't a Super Bowl champion, but he coached the Falcons to a Super Bowl. He got there with them. Let's go with the proven head coach, and let's go ahead and take a flyer on a once head coach offensive coordinator who we know is a bright mind but has been turned out of the league recently. Let's bring him back to the league and see what he can do. And that's what they did, and boom. Now you've got this perfect marriage between Jaden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury, Dan Quinn, and a very bright future in Washington. The Giants, on the other hand, are considering maybe dragging their feet and going into a fourth season with Brian Dable despite the team being on a 10-game losing streak. A very clear difference between the way that the new look, new ownership Washington Commanders were operating last offseason and the way that the New York Giants are operating now. And keep this in mind, guys. The Commanders didn't just move on from nobody. They moved on from Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera, for the last decade plus, was considered one of the best head coaches in the NFL. He was finally starting to phase out, finally starting to have a bad couple of seasons, and they said, yeah, we're just going to end this now and reboot. That's how it's got to be done. When the coach loses their ability, you move on. Do you guys really feel like Brian Dable still has the ability he had in 2022? No. So you know that it's time to move on. And I think the same could be said of Joe Schoen. His abilities that he had at one point, or that we thought that he had, we clearly misjudged it, and it's just time to move on and clean house. So, I mean, that's the argument that I'm going to keep making, Alex. I don't know if you've got any closing thoughts on that, but I will say in terms of the quarterback debate, I'm still on the crash for Cam train. I'm still leaning Cam Ward, but I have been starting to watch the film on both of these guys, and I'll leave you with this. I am starting to like both of them a lot. There are traits that I see in both of their games that I think are very translatable to high-level quarterback play at the NFL.
I'm not going to be upset with either of them. I want to make that clear. Either of them, I will sit there and I will root for 100%. And are there red flags for both of them? Absolutely. Am I concerned about some things? Yes. But the truth is, what quarterback coming out of college doesn't have flaws? What quarterback doesn't have red flags? Everyone does. How many people complained about Jaden Daniels' frame? I watched him carve up the Eagles defense yesterday. So, and that's with Dan Quinn, by the way, who's a defensive-minded coach. They got Cliff Kingsbury, who was horrible with Arizona, just horrible. And they're putting together a pretty damn good season right now. Terry McLaurin's been drafting that guy in fantasy for 5 years straight. Finally, he's good. Like, not even good, he's great. He's top 5 this year. Wasn't enough to get absolutely destroyed in my semifinal matchup, but it's fine. So, this is a situation where if you are the Giants, news should not be scary. News should be, at least we're not heading in the direction we are now, which is it's the worst team that we've seen. The 2021 roster was better than this, man. You had McKinney and Saquon on the roster, and it was better than what we're seeing today, by far. So they've managed to rebuild the whole roster and get worse. They had money to spend, got worse. Had superstars on the team, got worse because it let them leave. You know what I mean? Like, this is Joe Schoen's roster, guys. It is egregious. It is ridiculous to sit here and act like we have to give him a break because he didn't get his quarterback. How about everybody else? Screw the quarterback. How about the whole rest of the roster that he developed or he drafted? And how about the fact that Jalen Hyatt is a ghost in year 2? A ghost. Hasn't even touched the field for more than 20% of snaps this season in a single game. A what? You drafted a guy in the 3rd round who doesn't even play, and then you expect 4th and 5th rounders to take over starting jobs on day 1 for guys you're letting leave in free agency. That is what malpractice looks like, guys. When you draft a guy in the 5th round to replace Saquon Barkley. I love Tyrone Tracy. Don't get me like twisted about that. I love Tyrone Tracy, but the practice behind that. You're drafting a 5th rounder to replace Saquon Barkley. You're drafting a 4th rounder to replace the 4th rounder you spent on Daniel Bellinger. Come on. We spent the same exact draft pick to replace a draft pick that Joe Schoen made 2 years ago on the same position. What? What are you talking about? Evan Neal, we had to go sign a free agent to replace Evan Neal we spent an 8th overall pick on. You know what I mean? His free agent signings are not free agent signings to reinforce the roster, Anthony. Their free agent signings are meant to replace shit draft picks he missed on. That is how you screw a roster up. You have to supplement bad drafting with free agents. That's what Dave Gettleman did for years. And now we're seeing Joe Schoen do it again. And what is he doing? He's going to do it right now. He paid Daniel Jones, and to make up for that mistake, he has to draft a quarterback. You know what I mean? We're going to see him do it in the 2nd round. For the mistake of drafting Jalen Hyatt, he's going to have to draft another receiver to be our WR2 because Jalen Hyatt's not even close to being ready. This is what bad freaking roster construction looks like when you have to replace your own draft picks with free agent picks and your own draft picks with future draft picks. We're in a cycle of horrid. A cycle of ass is the best way to put it. Because he's doing this, he's replacing his own decisions with bad decisions. What competency comes from that? What patience? What is patience going to do? He's about to replace half of his own decisions with more of his own decisions in this upcoming draft and free agency class. And now people want to give him more time to do that? That's crazy to me. Insane. You have to turn the page because you can't let him make the same mistakes. You can't let him make the decision to replace his own mistakes. It's ridiculous. This is his roster, and he's about to rebuild it again? Unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's a key thing to say. This is his roster. There are very few Gettleman players left. It's Darius Slayton. Daniel Jones is now gone. Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas. It's actually the best players on the roster are the Gettleman guys who are left over. And then other than that, everybody else who's been sent home or who's been brought in, it's just been... There's not a ton of talent on this roster. The roster that was actually brought in by Joe Schoen. Yeah, a couple rookies, Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy, Tyler Nubin, Drew Phillips. Those rookies look promising. We've seen rookies have great first seasons, and it completely falls off the rail too, so you don't want to be too certain about these guys either. Brian Burns is a good pickup. He's a good player for the Giants, but just generally speaking, this team and the Joe Schoen acquisitions are not very good. So, and like you said, Alex, it's a really good point. A lot of his additions have been additions to his own subtractions. So it's like a net zero in the long run anyway. In fact, in many ways, it's a net negative. Like the subtraction of Xavier McKinney plus the addition of Tyler Nubin, it's still a net negative. This is the best safety in the NFL he let walk away, So no matter how good Nubin is or how good he's going to be in 3 years when the Giants inevitably then have to pay him, they're not going to get the level of production most likely that they lost from Xavier McKinney this past season. So and that's the likelihood of it. And that's really just been the story of Joe Shane so far. There's been a lot of players who have left and had success elsewhere, and meanwhile, the New York Giants have found little to no success over the last 2 years. So it's been a long time coming. I think that it's obvious how the season is going. I think it's obvious which way this is going to shake out. I think there's going to be a new GM making these picks. But listen, Alex, I'm going to be disappointed if it's not a new GM making these picks. But I'm also not going to be surprised because I think the competent thing to do would be to fire Joe Shane. And I do not trust John Merritt to do the competent thing. He has been incompetent at pretty much every turn over the last 6 years. So it's messy right now. Could get messier. Who knows? But maybe Joe Shane proves us wrong. Maybe he is back next year. He knocks it out of the park this offseason. Maybe it's a quick turnaround. It's possible, but the history, and that's what we're discussing, the history and the trends and the probability tells you that it's not very likely.
That's all
we would rather
use.
Bank on something that is likely than something that's not.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what it boils down to, man, is you have to try something new. You know what I mean? It's like we're shooting ourselves in the foot every single year. We've declined. We started a rebuild 3 years ago, and we've gotten worse in every single year. 3 years of sample size. This is not like it's a 1 year sample. Even a 2 year sample, I could say, oh, it's 2 years. They had a bad luck last year. It is what it is. Like, we'll throw it away because they made it to a playoff game in 2022. But like, we're talking about 3 years of sample, and we thought last year was bad. This year got astronomically worse.
And I also think it's a good question to bring up, and I've kind of loosely brought it up a couple times on the show, but I'll ask it to you. Who do you think contributed more to the wins in 2022, Joe Shane or Brian Daboll?
I mean, it couldn't have possibly been Joe Shane because it was barely his roster.
Roster that Brian Daboll dragged into the playoffs. So it's like the fact that the Giants and Giants fans want to fire Daboll but keep Joe Shane, the only time this team in the last 3 years has had any success, it hasn't been thanks to Joe Shane. So it's very confusing to me how the argument can be made that he is the lesser of the two evils here. I think he is the far greater of the two evils. I don't think either one of them is very good. I think they both should be fired. It's unfortunate to say. Again, I didn't want to be here 3 years down the road, but I think that you have to fire both of those guys. But if you're really going to make the argument that Joe Shane has done a better job than Brian Daboll, one of them has hardware. One of them won an award at the end of the season.
Yep.
I just, so...
I'll throw in there too, that playoff year, I don't look back and say like that was really impressive. You know what I mean? I think it was impressive with the roster we had, sure, but we had one of the easiest schedules in the league, and we beat one of the worst defenses in the history of the NFL to get to. And then we ran into the first good team we ran into. We got completely dragged across the freaking field and got booted out of the playoffs without a problem. That's what happened.
Dragged across the field by a team that we were facing for the third time that year. And they had dragged us across the field the previous
Twice.
2 times. We went 0-3 against the Eagles that year.
I'm like,
and we
the context people leave out.
Keep in mind, we barely scraped our way into the playoffs. We got in because we had a tie on our record.
Yeah.
It's not very normal. So, and that tie came against Washington, who we should have beaten. So that was when Washington sucked. So, yeah, I mean, at their best, truthfully and honestly, and everybody knows I don't like Dave Gettleman, truthfully and honestly, that would have been 2022 would have been Gettleman's 4th year. This could be the argument maybe in favor of Joe Shane, but I'm going to counter it quickly. The 4th year of Gettleman's roster is when the team finally made the playoffs. They made it under Shane and Daboll, but it was the 4th year of Gettleman's roster is the argument here. So you would say, okay, let's see what the 4th year of Shane and Daboll's roster looks like.
Minus
here's the counter argument. Here's the counter argument. Gettleman's roster in 2018 was really bad and got better all the way up to 2022. It wasn't pretty. He wasn't a good GM, but the 4th year of his roster, it was much better in 2022 than what he inherited in 2018. For Joe Shane, is the 22 roster that much better? Is the 25 roster that much better than 22? No, his roster has gotten worse each year. So even though we thought Gettleman was terrible, Alex, and he was, and he definitely didn't turn the team around quickly enough, by the time we got to a point where the team was competitive in 22, based on the 3 years of work that he did, it still wasn't good enough. And then if you look at Joe Shane, after 3 years of work, his roster is actually worse. The next GM taking over is going to be in a worse position than he was when he took over Gettleman's roster. And that should tell you everything that you need to know about the Joe Shane era for the New York Giants.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the truth is that he gutted the roster in year 1 and year 2. Like, he gutted it, completely gutted it. People want to give him his quarterback, a chance to get their quarterback. This is his team. Every other position on this team is his. He extended Andrew Thomas. He extended Dexter Lawrence. He went and traded for Brian Burns. These are all his decisions. And this team is the worst team in the NFL, right? There's a couple of really good individual talents, but these guys don't play like a team. You know what I mean? Like the roster is flawed. The depth is minimal. This is his roster in and out, except for the quarterback. Well, you could argue he did make that decision too. With extending Daniel Jones. He could have drafted a quarterback last year. He just decided not to. So, when you look at the situation, the Falcons, you could argue the Falcons are like the opposite of the Giants right now, where they were paying Kirk Cousins. We were paying Daniel Jones. They took a quarterback. The Giants didn't take a quarterback. And I'll tell you something right now, Anthony. If I was a Falcons fan, I'd be like, at least we got our quarterback and we're about to turn the page. At least at least we're already into the process of rebuilding and having had a bridge, and we just turned the new page. The Giants are in no man's land. They don't have anybody. They have nobody. So it's you're looking at the Joe Schoen era. Yeah, maybe he didn't get to draft his quarterback, but God, miss me with the dumb argument that he didn't have the chance to, because he absolutely did, and he decided not to draft one. And everybody else on this roster, his decision whether it was a draft pick, a free agent signing, or an extension. And this is where we are. So no, do I want Joe Schoen back? No freaking way. I think he's a decent guy. I have nothing against him personally. I just think he's built a really bad NFL roster. And I don't think it's really that hard to argue that that's just a fact. I don't think you can argue against it, to be quite honest.
It is a fact, and I'm actually going to bring up another example from the Detroit Lions that I think is the perfect example. Because they are the gold standard right now, the way that they've built their roster over the last few years, and now they're powerhouse. So let me bring up another example, Alex. The 2023 NFL Draft. This was Giants coming off of that playoff win. And so there was buzz, hey, Daniel Jones played well, but, maybe they franchise tag him, and then maybe they take a quarterback, right? Remember, we had those conversations. Even though he won us a playoff game, should we be looking at quarterback? And obviously, you and I were like, yeah, for sure. And even if you do sign him, maybe you should throw a dart at the board anyway, just because you never know. The Detroit Lions in that draft took Hendon Hooker. They only have 2 quarterbacks on their roster. That is an NFC championship contending roster that features just Jared Goff and Hendon Hooker. What stopped the New York Giants from taking a Hendon Hooker in that draft? What stopped them from having some insurance behind Daniel Jones? Again, 6 years since the Giants have drafted a quarterback. I'm not saying in round 1. I'm saying in all 7 rounds of the draft, it's been 6 years. That is, like I said, malpractice in and of itself. You have to throw a dart at the board at some point. Whether it's in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th round, you have to take a chance on any of those quarterbacks at any point. And the Giants didn't take a single one. So don't say that that Joe Schoen hasn't had the opportunity. What stopped him from taking at least a competent backup in Hendon Hooker? He beat out whoever else was on the Detroit Lions roster. He is their QB2. He is their only backup quarterback. They trust him that much. Why weren't the Giants trying to take a Hendon Hooker? Daniel Jones was that great that they couldn't take a Hendon Hooker and give him some competition? The Lions had Jared Goff. Jared Goff is a better player than Daniel Jones, always has been. Former number 1 overall pick who went to the Super Bowl with the Rams. Lost it, but went there. Daniel Jones has never had that level of success. Why didn't Joe Schoen think that, hey, you know what? Let's give him a backup, a young kid that we can develop for the next 3 years. We don't know what his contract is going to look like in the future. We don't know if it's going to be a hit or a miss. That's, again, my point. The Giants, when Joe Schoen took over the Giants, Alex, he tried to really preach that he always wanted to be planned. He always wanted to have a plan. He always wanted to be, thorough. A plan A, a plan B, a plan C. The Giants have never had a plan B under Joe Schoen. They've only ever had plan A. And anytime plan A hasn't worked, they haven't had a plan B. Plan B would be having another young quarterback on this roster, whether it was drafted in 22, 23, or 24. The fact that the Giants don't have a young quarterback on this roster, again, highlights that they are unprepared. They do not have a plan B at any point because they should have a young quarterback on this roster, whether it be a Penix or a Rattler. Doesn't matter. There should be a young guy on this roster. We all knew that they needed to walk away from that draft with a quarterback. So that's what I will leave it on because I think that is the best point to make. And again, highlighting the Detroit Lions and everything that they've done right over the last several years, that's the best way to do it. The fact that they were willing to take a Hendon Hooker at the top of the 3rd round, they were championship contenders in 2023, and they still went ahead and took a quarterback anyway just to give themselves some insurance. And the Giants are too good to take some insurance? No, the Giants needed to take insurance too, and they didn't. And that's another reason that you can add to a very long list of why the New York Giants need to fire Joe Schoen.
Yep. And God, I want to sit here and act like I could come up with a objection, like a be devil's advocate in this situation and why we should keep him. But I just have seen too many teams turn the page and get better in year one. We just watched the Commanders do it with a rookie quarterback paired with a new regime and a new culture and a new system and a new plan and a new strategy. And I just don't trust Joe Shane's plan. I don't think he has one. I think his plan, draft a quarterback and figure the rest out. It's not enough. It's not enough of a plan, man. You need to have a plan. Like, how is a general manager and a head coach that has already lost the locker room, embarrassed themselves in the 100th season of the Giants, about to go 0-9 at home? What kind of plan could you possibly have that has any sense of reality where you're able to reinstate your culture, rebuild your team, rebuild their respect for you, convince free agents to come here? What kind of plan? What plan? There's no plan that works. That plan doesn't work. There is none. It doesn't exist, right? It does not exist. I think John Mara knows that, though. I think he knows. Like, he's watching these games, man. There's no way. And people saying, well, you wanted them to tank. Abso-freaking-lutely. Anthony, we both wanted them to tank. This team is that. I mean, maybe you didn't, but I did. Like, I wanted them to freaking lose to get a quarterback because that's the only way to being good. But I'll tell you one thing. Us wanting to tank and the Giants actually doing it on purpose are very different. There is no way in hell that John Mara signed off on this team purposefully losing. And people are talking as if that's the case. It's such bullshit, dude. There's no way that John Mara signed off on the Giants purposefully losing football games. He would never sign off on that. And if he knew that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll were doing it on purpose, he would fire them, and it might just happen. So that argument is the dumbest one I've seen on social media.
I'm with you. I agree. I mean, John Mara would never stand for something like that. He would never allow that to happen in his franchise. So, yeah, I mean, and I'll say this, though, Alex, because just the last thing to respond to what you said there, because you said maybe I wasn't pro-tanking last year, and maybe I wasn't. I mean, I was flip-flopping because I wasn't sure whether or not I wanted them to. But whenever I said that I wasn't, that I didn't want them to purposely lose, that I wanted them to win games, it was with the notion in mind that I was taking a quarterback no matter what at number 6 or wherever we were picking. The Giants just didn't have that same mentality. That's where they messed up. If it were me and we still won those games down the stretch and we were still picking 6, everybody knows this. I was fine taking Penix. I was fine taking McCarthy. I would have even taken Nix if they were all off the board somehow. I would have taken a quarterback at number 6 no matter what. So that's why my argument, Alex, last offseason was, doesn't matter if you're picking 3 or 6 or whatever, you got to take a quarterback anyway. So you're just going to take the best one available and hope that it works. The Giants just didn't do that, but they should have. That was the right idea. So, that's the last thing that I'll leave you with and just respond to your tanking conversation there. But that pretty much wraps it up, man. And it's another hour-long episode where we flew off the handle and got angry with the team. But how can you blame us because of how bad this team is? I can't believe I sat and watched 4 quarters that looked like that against the Atlanta Falcons yesterday.
Dude.
The Falcons aren't even good. No. Hey, nice toe tap grab by Tyrone Tracy. Whatever. Who cares? I'm over
2 pick sixes.
2 pick sixes.
2 pick sixes. What the hell?
But hey, I will wrap it up with this. Happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays.
I hope you all have phenomenal time with your family and friends and whoever. Just hope you have a great holiday, cheerful season over the next week. We probably won't upload for the next couple of days, but when we're back, our bellies will be full, our hearts will be full, and we will be happy to discuss the New York Giants at great length once again. But yes, happy holidays to everybody, and thank you all for an incredible 2024. Thank you for all of your love and support that you always give us. We do constantly appreciate all of you, everybody who's ever clicked on a video, left a like, and even an angry comment telling me that you don't like my mustache. I love you anyway. But that's pretty much going to wrap this one up. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Fireside Giants powered by BetUS. We'll catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.